the second episode of SomerSand Chats about Improv.
And we are going to talk with Vinny Francois from the Improv College. And the topic will be characters and creating a safe space in improv.
The fact of playing a character that is very far away from your own natural personality, is it dangerous? Is it fake? How does it feel?
Yeah, this is something that I've thought about a lot over time because, people play characters, and I think there's a lot of awareness about how certain ethnicities or characters get played by other people. And I think, here's what I've always said, or at least this is what my current framework is. I think in improv, sometimes we have to operate quickly in broad strokes. And so it can be really easy to just grab a cliche off the shelf and just portray that cliche. And then the audience gets it really quickly and the performer doesn't have to do a lot of work. And it's like, all right, we're just this shorthand. But the problem with that is if everybody does that and people who aren't from other communities are playing cliched or caricatures of other communities, I think that's all that gets represented. And then these communities that don't really have a large place in large society are reduced to caricature, which is not comfortable for anybody. It just doesn't feel great. And so what I say is, unless you are very, very skilled, avoid playing characters of communities that aren't really yours, or you don't have a lot of experience with, and are generally don't have a lot of power, place, space in the community that you live in. And so anytime there's a minority who, doesn't always have the same treatment as the majority community, then it becomes really difficult for those minority people to watch majority community members play that. So it becomes a difficult dynamic. And if I was in the audience and I saw someone play a minority member and they weren't a member of that minority, and I'd be like, well, I'm put on, why not just have someone from that minority invite them to come play with you? Don't pretend to be this person. And especially when it's done in a very caricature, hack, very lazy way, it's even more insulting. So I think it's really, really difficult when we're not playing people who have a lot of power, position, prestige in society. And so there is some leeway of like playing people who are like, okay, well, these are people who are historically have been on, like, I'm not British, but I'll play a British person just because, I live in Canada, so the Queen is on my money. I cannot escape the English monarchy. They're literally the head of our country, even though we have a prime minister. So it doesn't feel like I'm, the terms punching down or punching up. It's hard to punch down on a nation that is ruling essentially yours. And so things like that feels very okay to do, and we can still do it in a kind of cliched, caricatured way, but that also feels a little bit lazy, and then it doesn't feel unethical, but it still feels a little bit lazy. And so when we're playing other people and we start with the cliche, we start with the caricature, I just call it just grabbing a vase. And so we can grab a vase and use that cliche in very short terms if we're operating really quickly, and that's fine. It's not great, but it's fine. But what we really should be aiming to do is putting flowers in the vase, because that's where the character comes in, where we deviate from cliche, where we deviate from caricature, and we put a unique lived life in that. So if there's a French policeman who maybe loves knitting, then it's like, oh, okay, that goes outside of the cliche, and now we're developing more interesting aspects of this character. So that's where we put flowers in the vase, and the vase itself is useful, but it's not great on its own necessarily. What we want to see is a full picture, a vase full of flowers and a full character.
Do you have any tips for improvisers who think, well, I want to play something, a different character? How could they do that? So I'd have some tips.
Looking around you, trying to get examples of people who we just live around us in daily life is always a fun way to find that inspiration. But generally, You have a few tools to start with. There's a few exercises where you start from a different point and end up with a character. So some people can start with a voice and be like, oh, I talk this way, or oh, hey, everybody. And you start with the voice and then figure out like, oh, well, how does this voice carry themselves? How do they move? How do they act? How do they feel today? Some people just start with an emotion. It's like, I'm angry. So it comes out in an angry voice, and then you carry yourself with that anger and you hold it tight or whatnot. So sometimes people start with a body language, body posture, a gesture, someone who talks a lot with their hands. Well, then how will they talk? How fast will they talk? And this becomes the character, and they move fast and think fast and want to bother people, and they're maybe a little too high energy. So it depends on how you want to start. So you can start with a voice, you can start with your body, you can start with your emotion, you can start with a job, an object. If you have an object in front of you, then start with that. There's a lot of, you kind of take a seed and kind of work your way out from there. And that can be a really fun way to explore characters.
Yeah.
What about some improvisers are a little bit afraid of playing an aggressive character because they're afraid that they might offend their scene partner. What do you think about that?
I think for anything, when you're playing with other characters, you have to always have open communication. One of the key things is in any group, everyone kind of has to know, like, where are the boundaries? How far can we go? What do you like? What do you not like? Some people don't like to be picked up. Some people don't want to talk about, maybe a grandparent recently passed away, so maybe they don't want to talk about grandparents. Everybody's an individual and has their own things of like, this is okay and this is not okay. And everyone has their own boundaries, and that's great. That's how it should be. And so the only way for me to find out whether I can do something with you is to have that conversation. So I love the fact that now before shows, people have a check-in process and be like, all right, does anybody have anything they need to tell us? Like, are there anything subjects you want us to stay away from? Or is there anything we should not do? Is there anything that you like, anything you love that we do? Then we can play the things that you do enjoy. And so when it comes to those things, I think everyone has to be aware that everyone has different boundaries, and also just talk to one another. Like, what do you like? What do you not like? And if you're able to be honest and open and be like, hey, I don't like this and I don't like that, then great, then don't do that. And if something happens in a scene where someone does something with me and I was like, oh, I didn't know I don't like this, feel free to just leave the scene. Like, always, like, there's no improv scene that's as important as my own well-being. Like, it's not really worth it to me personally. And so find a way, if it's not too difficult, you find a way to leave gracefully and just be like, all right, I gotta go now, bye, and then just leave the scene, I suppose. But yeah, if someone is doing something that is like truly bothering me in a scene, then I'll find a way to like end the scene, edit, change the subject, and then have a discussion at the end. And so not only is it important to have a discussion at the beginning of any kind of performance, but also at the end to see like, oh, hey, now let's talk about this moment, and create a space where everyone can feel like we can share those things. And the difficulty becomes when there's people who get really defensive about it and be like, that's not what I was doing, and there's anger, and then it becomes like, well, no one's going to share anything with you if you're just going to be defensive and angry about it. So you always have to be open, be like, oh, thanks for telling me that. Thank you for being honest with me, and be appreciative of the fact that someone is willing to share those boundaries with you, because it is personal, and there's a vulnerability there to be like, you know what, I really don't like this XYZ, and then if the person reacts with anger or defensiveness, it's like, well, no one's going to want to play with that person. No one's going to want to open up and share things with you. So that becomes really tough too. So I think it really is 100% about having those conversations. What's okay, what's not okay, and everything outside of that should be fine.
Yeah.
I guess these conversations, they have to happen on a regular basis because boundaries can change as well over time.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's one of the practices I always try to put in place is I have a check-in every single time at the beginning of my classes and shows. And, I try to have a checkout too and be like, all right, well, how did that go? Anybody have anything to share? Let's talk about this. And it really is, I think, once you can establish everybody's got goodwill for each other and is trying to actively take care of one another, things happen, you can talk about it and everyone can be like not defensive about it and just be like, oh, thank you for sharing that with me. I won't do it again. And then it doesn't happen and everybody's fine and move past it and still keep playing. So that's hopefully like the sign of a mature group that can play with each other in that way.
This is the end of our second episode with Vinny Francois, But we have a third one. Please come back and listen to the third one, which is all about good and bad shows in improv. And so we see you again with SomerSand Chats about improv.